From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. Cancer affects most people in Britain in one way or another. Celebrities, members of the royal family, Olympians and politicians. Even the health secretary, Wes Streeting, had it. So why haven't we been better at treating it? It's a question that's been asked for years. Let me take you back to January 2018 and a debate in the House of Lords which became intensely personal.
I got into a taxi, but I couldn't speak. I had 2 powerful seizures. I was taken to hospital. 2 days later, I was told that I had a brain tumour.
Baroness Tessa Jowell, who'd been a minister in the Blair and Brown governments, was wearing a woolly hat as she told a packed chamber about her own cancer and the limits of the treatment offered.
Less than 2% of cancer research funding is spent on brain tumours, and no new vital drugs have been developed in the last 50 years.
And it wasn't just brain tumours. The problems she raised chimed with the experience of cancer sufferers across the country.
We have the worst survival rate in Western Europe, partly because diagnosis in cancer is too slow.
It was a clarion call for better cancer care that offered patients more hope. It was also her final speech in Parliament. She died a few months later.
In the end, what gives a life meaning is not only how it is lived, but how it draws to a close. I hope that this debate will give hope to other cancer patients like me, so that we can live well together with cancer, not just dying of it. All of us, for longer. Thank you.
It's not often you get a standing ovation in Parliament. She did. And yet, 8 years later, how much has actually changed? 168,000 people die from cancer in the UK every year. That's 460 people every single day. It's the biggest overall cause of death in Britain, and our survival rates are still among the worst in Europe. But now, the government has published a new national cancer plan. It boldly claims that by 2035, 3 in 4 people will either be cured of cancer or will be able to live well with it. But will it work? The story today: Britain is in a cancer crisis. Will a new strategy fix it?
I'm Shaun Lintern, health editor of the Sunday Times.
Shaun, to understand how significant this government plan might be, I suppose we have to look at the state of cancer care in the NHS now. How bad is it? I mean, how much more likely are you to die of cancer in the UK than other places in the world?
Yeah, it's an important question, and unfortunately, there's not that much good news for our listeners in relation to cancer in the UK. We do, unfortunately, come towards the bottom of most major developed countries in terms of our outcomes, and that's in relation to a lot of NHS care, but particularly in cancer. And our 5-year survival rates for lung, liver, brain, esophageal, pancreatic and stomach cancers, they are all amongst some of the worst compared to other countries. And I think the UK ranks as low as 28 out of 33 for 5-year survival rates of stomach and lung cancer, 25th for brain cancer and 26th for pancreatic cancers. And lung cancer survival rate is 19% compared to 27% in Norway. So we do have some significant way to go in improving the outcomes for people in the UK on cancer.
Yeah. And I suppose if you're trying to identify where the problems arise, I mean, let's just start at the start of the process. Is it diagnosis?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big problem, cancer. Let's be realistic about that. And the solution it isn't just to criticise NHS care and the care on hospital wards. Patients have to, first of all, get there. And we know that in Britain, we actually have a problem that is different to those in Europe. We are slower as a population to come forward with symptoms of cancer. That's been proven in studies. People in France and other countries in Western Europe, they are much more willing to, at the first sign of a niggling problem, they will go and request a scan, go to their primary healthcare physician and start investigating it. And we in the UK, possibly because we love the NHS so much, because it's our national religion, as has been said many times, we don't want to, quote, bother the doctor or waste people's time.
Actually, which is too stoic.
I think actually that stoicism of British people can actually lose valuable weeks and months, and time with cancer is everything. The sooner you're diagnosed, the sooner you can be treated. And I think I'm right in saying that around 40% of cancers are actually diagnosed in accident and emergency departments, where people are there for either other reasons or they're there because symptoms have become problematic. So being diagnosed in A&E is not what you want. That is a suggestion that the cancer's gone already too far. And there are 4 stages of cancer, and stage 4 effectively means that the cancer is spreading and could well be terminal. So the crucial thing is to diagnose more cancers at stages 1 and 2, where they can be treated and potentially even cured and give people their life back. And so we all as a population have a little bit of work to do to come forward when we have symptoms. And there's a whole public awareness, public health message there, and that's before we ever get to the doors of a hospital.
Is there also something about the fact, our relationship with GPs has changed? In the old days, you'd have a GP that was with you for much of your life and would maybe see that something had changed in your health, whereas now, we have these big trusts and you might see a different GP every time. Is that part of the problem?
I think it could be. Continuity of care, as we would call it, in GP surgeries, that is an important factor. We'll all be familiar with the stories when people say, I went to the GP 3-4 times before I got diagnosed. And that is...
you're right. It's not just that people are being stoics. Sometimes they will go and they don't get the diagnosis, when they first present.
Of course. So we have a taxpayer-funded healthcare system, so that requires an element of gatekeeping. And that is the role of GPs. That's what they've always played. And, the government does recognise that there needs to be a bit of work done to make sure GPs recognise when they've seen patients, regularly or more than a few times, perhaps they need to think a bit differently. And there is some campaigns going on in GP surgeries to kind of give that message. So we need to come forward faster. GPs need to do what they need to do, and we need to get people diagnosed as soon as we possibly can.
How about after diagnosis? How quickly can you expect treatment to begin on the NHS?
So this is where we get into the real nub of issues in relation to cancer treatment and treatment generally for all healthcare issues in the UK at the moment. People will be very familiar of the waiting list crisis that we've got in the NHS. It was happening long before COVID, but COVID really put the brakes on this work. And when it comes to cancer, the NHS has a problem with targets, and you are supposed to be treated within 62 days of a referral for cancer. I'm afraid the target for that is 85% of those patients. Unfortunately, the NHS is well below that target at achieving only 70%. So that does mean people are waiting longer than 62 days to begin their treatment. If you think about what that means for people when they've got a diagnosis of cancer, that's a really long time to be living with that. And the NHS is very well aware of this. They're trying to raise this level of treatment, but ultimately there is a capacity question for the NHS. How much capacity do we have to provide these treatments? If you need surgery, how many operation theatres do we have? How many CT scanners do we have? We don't perform well across a whole load of metrics that effectively make up our capacity to deliver care for cancer patients.
And are there problems with the cancer treatment itself, with the quality of the treatment? Or is it just that people aren't getting it quickly enough?
I think we can be confident that actually when people actually reach the operating theatre, when they reach the clinic for their chemotherapy, actually the care that people receive in the UK is pretty good, and it is of standard. It's about getting people there faster, making sure that we've got the capacity to deliver that treatment to the volume of patients. I mean, we are talking around 160-odd thousand people a year, I think, die from cancer. It's not a small problem for the NHS.
And Shaun, as our in-house health expert, you watch the NHS and you watch these problems over years as they build and get worse. You mentioned that cancer care was already bad before COVID. COVID has clearly made it worse because waiting lists are so much worse. Why were we historically so bad at it?
I think actually you can say this about almost all areas of healthcare in the UK. We have not, for at least 20 years, since the Blair government, we haven't invested in the raw ingredients of a healthcare system. So, as I mentioned earlier, the OECD scores us pretty low for the numbers of scanners, for example, the number of doctors. We've lost a lot of the raw materials you need to make a health system function, and that's inevitably going to impact on your rates of diagnosis, your rates of successful treatment. Some patients will fall between the stools. They will have their operations cancelled, and I'm afraid we have seen recently with the junior doctors' strikes, cancer patients have had their operations cancelled just as much as people waiting for sort of routine operations, and so that is a real factor that the NHS is the classic phrase is running hot. We've been saying that for 20 odd years. It's running so hot, it's kind of white hot now, and that's really the problem, that we're trying to build the plane as we're flying it, I suppose.
My name's Jeremy Langmead. I work for an online retailer called Mr. Porter, and I write for The Times, and I've had prostate cancer since 2022.
Jeremy, how did you first find out that you had prostate cancer?
I went for a normal annual checkup with my GP, and he did a PSA test, which was a standard part of it. It was a private GP at that time. And then he rang to say, we're worried that your PSA has risen. And so I did another test and it had risen again. And then I had to do a scan, which showed that there was something on my prostate. And then I had to do a biopsy. So, and thus the journey began.
It's really interesting that you say you saw a private GP at the time because, you didn't have any obvious symptoms. You wouldn't have been diagnosed without that PSA check. And that's basically a blood test, which is the standard screening for prostate cancer. But unless it had been done just when it was, you wouldn't have known for months or years.
Absolutely. I didn't even know what the PSA was or that it was being done. I mean, in a way, I was lucky because I'd moved up to the north of England to the Lake District, where I saw a national health GP. And it was only because I was back in London for some work, and I just thought, I'm just going to go and see my old London private GP, just because it's an annual checkup, and you never know.
A lot to be said, it turns out, for an annual checkup.
Well, totally. And especially as if you don't know to ask for it, you won't get one on the NHS. So I was really lucky that they caught him. When
they told you, out of the blue, at a time when you didn't even think you were ill, that you were suffering from prostate cancer, just what was that like?
It was so weird, because to say totally out of the blue, I had no symptoms. And then I was told that it was a high-grade aggressive prostate cancer as well. So it wasn't, one way you can wait and watch, or it needed treatment really quickly. And then I went back into the NHS after seeing my GP. So this was all through the NHS. And I think the hardest thing at that stage for me certainly was was all the tests you are having and not knowing whether to feel sorry for yourself because you don't know if it's bad or not. And some of the tests I found, they're tough. Scans are one thing, but biopsies in that area is not pretty. And it was a really stressful period, I would say. Also, I think for people who live in rural areas, which is often forgotten, the joining up between the different hospitals is not always as seamless as you would hope it to be. So often you're having a scan here in one place, and then you're having a biopsy in another place, and you're getting the results in a third place, which is what happened to me. So there's not only are you worried that the messaging isn't getting between all those hospitals correctly, you're also, depending on how able you are to travel, if you don't drive or you can't afford transport, it's a big problem in rural areas for this period.
I can imagine. And given that they told you it was quite aggressive, how long does that period of testing to treatment take?
Well, it's meant to be 6 weeks from sort of first test to, the results and a positive action being taken. It was probably a little bit longer. Again, I was, lucky in that a friend of mine, her brother-in-law was a surgeon, and he looked at results and said, this is a high-grade aggressive one. You need to get rid of it really quickly. And I said, well, should I do that privately or should I do it with the NHS? And he said, well, you can do it with the NHS. It'll still be me, but it'll be quicker if you go privately just because of the bureaucracy rather than a waiting list. And with what you've got, we need to get it out as quickly as possible.
Did you have a sense of how long that waiting list would have been? If you'd waited for the NHS, how long might that have taken?
Well, I think because of the high grade of mine, I think it wouldn't have been so long, but it would have been a couple of months more, maybe. I was advised to go for it straight away, and my mum lent me the money to have a private radical prostatectomy.
When that was done, you sort of had a moment of getting the all clear, but that hasn't lasted. I mean, just tell us what's happened since.
Yeah, it's a bumpy road. So I did get the all clear after the surgery a few months later. And then also you carry on testing every few months just to make sure. And 3 months after getting the all clear, it started growing back again. So then you go back into that world, and I had to do radiotherapy, the course of radiotherapy for 7 weeks, and then also go on a hormone therapy treatment for 2 years, which I came off last May, and then it's growing back again. So it's an onward fight is a word I don't like to use, but yeah. The weird thing is I've been fighting this since 2022, but I'm lucky in a way to be able to say that because I've had friends who've been diagnosed with cancer and they aren't lucky enough to still being treated. For men, a lot of it, because of this particular type of cancer, there's a lot of side effects, or can be, with the treatment. It can affect your sexual ability, it can affect the way your body changes, it can affect so many different parts of your body. And those side effects can be hard to deal with. There's so many things that can happen to you that are aside from the main thing of having the cancer itself. And I think what's hard is my experience with the NHS so far. They have been amazing. I'm being treated in London. I moved to London for the treatment, but they are great. And the Guy's Cancer Centre have been brilliant when I see them and when I have my appointments and with the treatment. But in the in-between periods is when you sort of are not quite sure who to turn to, because there isn't just a number you can ring or text. And one of the later effects of the radiotherapy is I have developed lymphedema, which is where you can get, because I had so many lymph nodes removed, that I have, my legs can swell up and they hurt, and that's because you didn't have lymph nodes working properly. It's, I think, 6 months since I was told to wait for an appointment to help with the lymphedema, and I've never heard since. And so the side effect treatments is the hardest bit, really. They're really good at the emergency stuff, really good at the care when you go and see them. That in-between period, you can feel a bit by yourself trying to deal with all the side effects. You almost have to sort of self-treat. You do spend a lot of time on Google. The chat lines are quite good, that are part of Macmillan or part of Prostate Cancer Research UK, because often you get more information from other people going through it than you do from the medical profession itself.
Yeah, thank God for that community. The government is releasing this sort of ambitious new plan to try and do something about cancer treatment. What would you want them to look at? How would you want to improve the NHS's care around this?
I mean, it's really hard because I know it's a ginormous task, and the cases of cancer are on the rise. So I totally empathise with the problem. I think it's the joining up. You can get lost in between those appointments or between the big treatments, and it's how you care for people when they're not in the hospital, and also for those who look after those with cancer. I've seen a lot of people that die of cancer, and that's really hard because, again, if they're dying from home until they go to a hospice, that treatment can be really hard. There's no one there with you all the time, and there's no one to talk to. And also, I think a sort of siphon of information, and it's so good that people are talking about cancer a lot more, and the newspapers are covering cancer a lot more. But there's so much information that you read almost daily at the moment, and it's really hard to work out, is that relevant to me? I mean, there's a new treatment for prostate cancer that can stop it spreading if you get it early. And then you say, oh, that's brilliant. And then actually it gives you 8 weeks more of your life. Well, 8 weeks is great, but it's not the game changer perhaps you thought it was going to be.
Jeremy, just finally, you've formed a community. You've got to know so many people with cancer who've experienced many of the same things as you. You even set up a podcast with a friend who has since sadly died. When you hear the government saying, we have this ambitious new plan which will mean 3 in 4 patients will either be cured entirely or will live well with cancer by 2035, how does that make you feel?
Well, I think you have to be optimistic, otherwise what's the point? Is how they define live well, and live well is sort of open to interpretation, and living well is different for different people. Quality of life, that's really important to me, and that's easy for me to say because I haven't been told I've got 6 months to live. So it's really hard to unite, one approach for everyone. But I just hope they listen to the people who are going through it, and also support the people who have to support, because 1 in 2 people are going to either have cancer or know someone with cancer. And it's very hard for people to deal with it if they're not told how to. Even just what to say can be really hard, which is why I did the podcast, was to help those living with cancer and their friends and family, how you talk to people about it, how they want to be treated, how you make them feel better, and how you can support them.
Shaun, before we look at the details of the government's new cancer strategy, I suppose it might be helpful to look at how other countries have done this. In particular, Denmark is sort of starting to emerge as the gold standard on this. They had a moment of introducing a cancer strategy back in 2000. Tell us a bit about how it's worked out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Denmark, they launched a plan which was very much focused on fast diagnostic pathways, building that capacity that we've talked about, and having a sort of really clear standards on when patients go forward for operations, when they get their diagnosis, and streamlining the whole process, really. And I think that they had a very strong national leadership on this, and they have seen some good results from that. They've turned it around.
And they went from a level not dissimilar to ours.
Yeah, exactly. So they are shining a path for us, a light for us to follow in that sense. But the crucial thing is you must have the capacity, the funding to deliver on any plan. That's the crucial ingredient, I think.
And for Denmark, how much better are they compared to us now?
So they've invested in 5 times more the number of CT scanners than we have here in the UK. The result of that is you can diagnose more people, and they've got the capacity to treat them. So again, in Denmark, 99% of patients with a diagnosis of cancer will start their treatment within 4 weeks. If you contrast that with the UK, where I think in November last year, the percentage was around 30% waited 2 months for treatment. So, we are lagging behind them. And so Denmark have seen real results for this. So they're now pretty much top of the table in the OECD for cancer survival rates versus ourselves, who are much lower down, and we've got a long way to go to catch them up.
And they started with a cancer strategy back in 2000. They've had 4 more since, but they've really made cancer the thing they're focusing on. For the UK, which is now launching this big cancer strategy, what do we know about what it will include?
Yeah, so this is a long-awaited cancer plan. It's one of a number of plans that the new Labour government is bringing in. They've already announced a 10-year plan for the whole NHS, and this is a targeted intervention, if you like, to kind of replicate what the Danes did in terms of giving the NHS a real target, some leadership and a direction of travel so that everyone's pulling together to deliver this. The plan includes a number of quite radical changes, I think, and some big investment. We're talking about £2.3 billion of spending, which the government says will deliver 9.5 million additional tests by 2029. So again, this is about getting people the diagnosis. But the plan also is talking about investing in more scanners and digital technology, automatic testing. There's an element of genetic screening and testing for every patient who might benefit. So you'll get a sort of DNA readout of your own tumour. I think one of the most interesting things about this is actually less about the treatment and more about the NHS being available and open for people to come to it. So, for example, community diagnostic centres where a lot of the crucial scans and tests are being done, they're going to be open 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that I think is really crucial, because I think one of the biggest problems we have in the UK healthcare system is access.
And Shaun, the ambition is impressive. The government are talking about transforming survival rates. Tell us a bit about what we know they're aiming for.
Yeah, so I think the government are being ambitious here. The target, I think, is for around 75% of patients who are diagnosed from 2035 will be cancer-free or living well after 5 years. There is some cynicism about that because it's going to be difficult. How do you test that? How do you measure that? But the ambition is certainly what we need. And I think, as with the government's 10-year plan, you don't turn around a healthcare system by constantly saying everything's terrible, we can't improve things. The government is at least saying we can try to do this. And so I think, we can take some hope from this. There is a plan, there is a target, and there is some energy behind this, which I think is what's perhaps been lacking in the last 15, 20 years.
How much will they rely on tech and AI to transform some of these outcomes?
Well, that's really an interesting question because we have seen in the last few years, obviously everyone's familiar with the dawn of AI and ChatGPT, and we've all got it on our phones and laptops now. But actually, there's a much bigger revolution going on in medicine, and particularly in the diagnosis of things like lung cancer, for example, where AI is performing as well or better than humans. I think we will always have an element of humans checking the results, but there are software now that can streamline and scan thousands of images in huge record times. That potentially means faster diagnosis. And similarly, we're also using AI in relation to better targeted scans, better targeted chemotherapy, drugs. There's a whole range of areas where technology and AI is helping. Robotic assisted surgery is helping to perform surgery on difficult tumours. So there's a lot of weapons in our arsenal against cancer. I think what I'd like to see from the plan in detail is also a bit of emphasis on the public health messaging as well. We can all do a bit ourselves to lessen the risks of cancer. Things like the risks of alcohol and cancer, fatty diets, lack of exercise. There is a public responsibility on our side as well. If we all do our bit, if the NHS is given the funds, the tools, the capacity to do what it does well, we might just crack this.
Shaun, for you, you watch public policy in this area all the time. How big a deal is this cancer strategy?
I think it's a really big deal. I think for a number of reasons. Announcing something like this, it says to everybody in the health service, this is a mission. This is what the country is going for. We might fail to achieve it, but the process of reaching for that goal will actually help thousands of people. And if you've got cancer in the next few years and the NHS successfully treats you, I think you'll be very grateful. And I think for the government, they're showing the leadership that we need for a health service that has been a little rudderless for a long time. I think there are risks, though, with a plan like this. We mustn't forget that there are other patients, other diseases that don't get the focus and attention that cancer does, and they need treatment, they need scanning, they need capacity and help as well. And that's an important message back to the government, really, is that they've got to remember everybody in this. So this plan is to be welcomed. It's really exciting. If they deliver even a third of what they're hoping to do, it will be a positive for the NHS. But we also have to care for those without cancer as equally as well, and there's a lot of challenges there.
Shaun, you mentioned earlier, the NHS, we all think of it as a national religion. It's something we all rely on. It almost, our expectations are almost too high. We expect it to fix everything. The burden on it is extraordinary. For years now, for most of my lifetime, we've watched it being under increasing pressure. As you say, it's running white hot. Is this a moment when things might genuinely change? Whether it's through AI and tech and how that might alleviate some of the pressure, could things genuinely feel like they were just working much better?
Well, I think we're definitely at a point where things are changing in the NHS. So this isn't always about more money as well. So the NHS has been given more money by this government, and that's to be welcomed. But I think those in the NHS recognise the answer isn't just a bigger chequebook, and we can't end up in a situation, as Wes Streeting has said, where we end up as a national health service with a country attached to it. And we are seeing the NHS respond to that. There's a huge reorganisation going on to try and make the NHS more streamlined, more targeted, and ultimately focused on doing what it's supposed to, which is treating patients. There's huge challenges. It won't happen overnight. And I think that is the challenge, that we are impatient as a country to see the NHS performing better, like it used to do, and better than others. And I think we have to just be a little patient, I'm afraid. You cannot turn this tanker around overnight. But I think the government strategies are moving us in the right direction.
That was Shaun Lintern, health editor for the Sunday Times. And before that, you heard from Jeremy Langmead, who contributes to the Times and is brand and content director for Mr. Porter. Today's producers were Micaela Arneson and Harry Stott. The executive producer was Tim Walklate, and sound design and theme composition were by Mal Assetto. If you can, do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.